Drinking overuse and tall drinking short fuse and getting in my own way.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Jaren, and today we are talking about Twisters. In this sequel, we follow a retired tornado chaser and meteorologist as she is persuaded to return home to Oklahoma and work with a new team with new technologies. When I was about 5 years old, my parents were gifted a VHS tape copy of the original 1996 Twister. Now, I was very fascinated with the box art, and it's basically because there was a label that said, from the creators of Jurassic Park, and for those of you who know me very well, Jurassic Park is my favorite movie of all time. I actually saw that movie for the very first time back in '94, and that really just had all my expectations lined up because of the how top tier the special effects were back then. Popped it into my VCR, and the first thing that comes up is a little short film with the Tasmanian Devil from the Looney Tunes simulating a tornado destruction. And I thought it was cute because it really transitioned very well into the beginning of the feature, and I ended up growing up with that movie. It just became part of my watching rotation of on my little VHS tape collection. Now, I've always just grew up reading articles about how a possible sequel to Twister could be in the conversation, and I just didn't think it was necessary. I thought it was a horrendous idea, especially kind of hearing a lot of people's theories and what could it be about. And, part of me, I didn't want it, and the other half, I was just very curious because about a decade and a half ago when I worked at the theater, I actually saw a film called Into the Storm, and I was hoping that it would be like the next generational movie for Twisters. And, modern CGI just really bothered me, that it just didn't really come forth with what I really kind of got that magic in the bottle when it came to Twister. And then we got the announcement that the sequel was definitively coming out from Warner Brothers and Universal and Ablin Entertainment. I couldn't even believe that Steven Spielberg still wanted to be attached to this, but money talks, especially when you're coming off from making Jurassic Park sequels. I mean, Jurassic World, if you may. And then the first trailer comes out, and you're like, ooh, these guys are serious because they're using the same font as the original film. And then they're reiterating the same lines with some new faces, and you got the director of Minari coming to do his big blockbuster feature with the writers of The Revenant and Top Gun Maverick penning the script. And after seeing the film for the very first time, I thought it was okay. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible, but it was good enough. Starting off with the story, I'm actually glad this is not a legacy sequel. We're not following characters who know or are related to the original cast members of the first film. You could honestly not know anything about this IP and kind of go in blind, just kind of enjoy the ride for what it is. With that being said, there are some little references and minuscule details that a lot of fans will kind of get a little chuckle out of, kind of enjoy as a little treat, but nothing that will completely leave out new audiences in the dark. Now, because this installment kind of leans more into the territory of a reboot than an actual sequel, we get to see some familiarity, some retreading of some of the goals that they set out, as well as our characters' motivations. But with some of our new ideas and refreshing approaches, we get to see that done completely in a more interesting way, completely in a different route. And not going to spoil it, but they are a little far-fetched than what I've imagined, but I was very invested to how they were going to get there. When you do a contemporary reboot to a sci-fi film of any sorts, you gotta update the gear, upgrade the technology. Here, you get to follow two separate storm chasers, one who's corporately sponsored and the other with a streaming Patreon, and you get to see all the little fancy gadgets to the makeshift craftsmanship that both teams bring to the table, especially with how they collect data, how they chase tornadoes, how they practice safety, and how they do it with all a little bit of flair. Whether that would be with new sensors or fireworks, personally, I love the way they pimped out Glenn Powell's Dodge Ram with the drilling rods, the race car seatbelt straps, and the rocket cannons. Oh man, that truck was able to withstand some serious wind velocity. When it comes to the tornadoes, CGI and VFX work has come a very long way in the film industry. I was actually surprised with how much work went into every twister to look as unique as the next for every sequence. And from the way that they would just form the path to their path of destruction, I was actually shocked with how much towns around Oklahoma we were actually going to see get destroyed instead of just walking through the aftermath like in the first one. I mean, it's nice to know that the filmmakers used actual footage of real tornadoes to incorporate in the film, but if I'm going to be honest, I felt like they were missing a few little key ingredients that made the tornado feel like its own character, like in the first movie. It was the sound design and the signature score that really made the Twister terrifying in that first movie. I mean, it would roar, it would darken, it would hail, and the winds just sounded so choked up and heavy. And I'm not sure if it was my auditorium's issue or if it was just the way it was presented, but unfortunately, the surround sound and the bass just didn't take that storm up a level of intensity for me. And I gotta say, with how much action scenes we got into the suck zone, there wasn't really any memorable set pieces that stuck out or really committed to the stakes. Majority of the time, the tornado just shows up and dissipates within the minute. Although I did like that one sequence where the power plant catches on fire and then that whole twister just turns it into a flaming cyclone. But at the end of the day, it was just kind of sad when majority of your set pieces and action sequences are just all over the trailers. Now, where the movie lacks in quality of action, it does make up for in its convictions of its scientific theories and its dramatic elements of human emotions. Now, I am no expert to how a tornado works, but I was actually surprised with how much factors were still being studied, which how much were being explored to up until this day. I was actually fascinated with how much I got to learn, whether it was fact or fiction. Now, surprisingly enough, there was actually a lot of characterization work that was put into the script, and you might think there are too many characters in here, especially when it comes to our two groups of storm chasers, but fortunately enough, the script really focuses and zeroes in on our three main characters played by Daisy Edgar Jones, Glenn Powell, and Anthony Ramos. We got Anthony Ramos, who plays Javi. He's a friend of our main character, Kate, but he's doing all that he can to make things right after their shared traumatic past. And I think that he's very misguided by his career, but he still has a lot of heart. We also have Glenn Powell, who plays Tyler, aka the Tornado Wrangler. His group of storm chasers are a jack of all trades with their YouTube influences and their adrenaline junkie tactics. I mean, a lot of the group's personality and energy really comes off as obnoxious and annoying. But as the story progresses on, you actually see their true colors and who they are, and they become extremely likable. Tyler has many great moments to shine, especially with a lot of his great chemistry with Kate, but between the banter and the underlining romance, they become each other's catalyst to flush out a lot of their vulnerabilities as well as facing their fears together. Daisy Edgar Jones as Kate. Man, I remember about a couple years ago, I saw her on that Hulu original film for the very first time called Fresh with Sebastian Stan. That was kind of a horror comedy with a little bit of romance. And as much as I wanted to see her in more horror films, I was very much excited to see what she could do in a blockbuster. And wow, I love the way her character was written here and how she executes it. She's basically Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton's characters from the first film rolled into one. She's smart, calculative, and intuitive, and the way that she is introduced is very traumatic, and I love the way that it kind of sets her up with how she approaches danger, as well as trying to work around her internal struggle. And then when we get to that part of the story where Kate and Tyler set their differences aside, begin to work together and see eye to eye, you get to see a much more passionate, a much more lively version of her character. And I love the way the pacing handled it, the natural progression of seeing those layers peel back. And when those characters are suddenly put into danger, you really feel for them. Also, may I address the attraction between our three main characters that could have easily gone into a love triangle, and I am so glad they didn't because they stayed focused and they kept it platonic from beginning to end. Overall, the one element that holds it back from me from calling this a dumb fun sequel is the way that they address FEMA and other organizations like it. I mean, it's kind of devastating, a little bit of a sore subject, but the way that they kind of strongly address this underlining message and never explore it, never lean into it, was just kind of weird for me. Also, if you're a country fan, this movie has one of my favorite soundtracks of any major motion picture of 2024 by far. Luke Combs is the man. And this may not be the high octane blockbuster sequel that they were trying to sell you on, but this somehow lightly honors the original film while also breathing new life for new generations to enjoy a movie like Twisters. Well, alright guys, that's all I got to share about that movie. Go ahead and check it out on the biggest screen as you can with the loudest sound as possible. I hear 4DX is the experience to go. I should have saw that one instead. But thank you guys again so much for watching and taking some time out of your day to hear me talk some movies. Look forward to more reviews. I am Jaren, and I'll see you guys at the theater. Take care.